Yeah, so about that editor tutorial I said I was gonna make, yeah, it's gonna be a while, if I ever make it. Let me preface this by saying that I actually really like the new editor. It's a huge step in the right direction, and it brings numerous convenient and much needed changes to the user experience. And in the end, I would take this over the old editor any day. The presentation is akin to a legit game engine like Unity, and even in its current state, I legitimately like it. Having said that though, yeah, I have my issues with it. Obviously there are some bugs like the central panel being completely broken and not updating when you import a map, as well as when you add triggers about the interface ID limit. The editor creates these ghost triggers that break the editor in many different ways, and yeah, there are some glitches with the editor, which is to be expected. I mean, the new editor is essentially in beta, and we are the guinea pigs testing it out and giving feedback, and in any ways I already reported the 2 bugs to Solar, so they should be working on this. But beyond the bugs, I just feel that despite all the beneficial and amazing features that have been added in, there are numerous annoyances that I found with the new editor, some of which actually stem from these beneficial additions. And while I do enjoy a lot of these features for what they are, I feel that they stop short of being completely useful. Like they could be taken further, like they can be made even better than they are. And as a longtime Krunker game maker, I'll never get used to calling them games, I would like to give a few suggestions for the developers to consider, things that in my opinion would bring the new editor in an even better direction. My first suggestion is with the quick add feature. It does have potential to be a godsend, as I won't have to go into our object menu every time I need a new object, but due to the limited selection of objects you can create using quick add, it's almost pointless. Yeah, cubes and spawn points are very much essential, and both custom assets and placeholders can be useful as well, but there are so many other objects that I personally use arguably just as often. For example, as a parkour game maker, I like using ramps, ladders, score zones, checkpoints, and even triggers. And to be honest, I almost never use custom assets or placeholders. Not to mention, other people who make competitive maps may use different objects more than I do, like hardpoint zones or flags. And my suggestion to make this quick add a little better is 1. Increase the total selection from 4 objects to 8. And 2. Allow us to customize our quick add buttons with our own selection of objects. With these changes, we would have a much more expansive, personalized quick add that, in my opinion, would be considerably more useful than the current one. The second big suggestion that I have has to do with these panels, specifically the lock function. Now I understand why with the current system of panels the lock function is necessary, but in my personal opinion, having to lock a tab just to select objects without it going right back to the object tab is just annoying. And having to unlock a tab before opening another tab is also annoying. It's an annoying fix to an annoying problem. Not to mention that there's literally no reason to lock the left panel, as the central tab is the only tab that appears there. What I'd suggest here is 1. Remove the damn lock button. Just get rid of it. And 2, instead of having to go up to the menu bar and select the tabs from up here, you could just put the tabs right on this top part of the panels. And much like in the settings pop-up, you can just switch to the tabs you need right in the panel. For example, in the left panel you can have the central tab, then put in the environment, terrain, and zone tabs along with it. And in the right panel you could put in object, tools, customize, and grouping. Basically, the left panel controls the map itself, while the right controls the objects and groups. And all the tabs are right there, they're easy to access, and you don't have to go into the menu as much. In fact, at this point, you don't even need the component menu at all. Then to finish it off, you could make it so that selecting an object doesn't automatically switch to the object tab, therefore completely eliminating any need for that stupid lock. And if there are spacing issues with the tabs, well, the panels themselves are already resizable, and you could probably just condense inactive tabs and use icons to label them. Plus, if the user is using Chrome, they can just zoom in and out to their liking if the UI is too big. Now those are the 2 big suggestions that I would really like to have. And now I'm going to give some suggestions that are not that necessary, but would be nice haves. Basically, they aren't as important as the suggestions I made before. First off, speaking of zooming in and out, it would be nice to have a UI scale setting similar to what is in Krunker.io, like the actual game. Another suggestion I have is tooltips. Yeah, they may be time consuming to write and implement, but with how abstractly some of the features are presented, tooltips would be nice to have, especially for newer players. For example, when you hover over an object in the object menu, you could have a brief tooltip describing what each object does. Or for the test and host buttons in the menu bar, you can explain what each one does. Or for like Object Painter, you can explain how to use it, and you get the idea. Another small thing is that in the Essentials tab, it would probably be a good idea to differentiate which of these settings change game settings that are baked directly into the game, or which settings have to do with host presets. So you could put camera and player under game and modes, classes, and settings under a new header called host. I just feel that this would make it much more clear as to what each of these affect. And one last tiny little thing, a total object counter would be nice, like not having to do math every single time I want to crunch numbers, please. Now those are the main suggestions I have for the Krunker Editor itself, but there's one last thing I want to propose. Maybe you could possibly release a standalone offline Krunker Editor? Maybe? In case the internet goes out and you really want to make some Krunker games for some reason. I'd assume that for the most part it probably won't be too much work, just package the editor itself into a downloadable exe file, and then add update functionality similar to the Krunker client. Now I saved this particular suggestion for last because there are some potential problems that could arise from the offline editor, and it has to do with testing and hosting maps. Both testing and hosting require you to go onto Krunker.io, which is online, and if you're offline, wouldn't that mean you wouldn't be able to test your maps? I don't know for sure. This is a problem that if the developers do choose to make an offline Krunker editor, they need to find a solution to it. So too long didn't read or watch or listen or whatever. First and foremost, fix the bugs. That part is almost completely done already, so check on that one. Make the quick add feature customizable, get rid of the lock and put all the tabs on the panel so you can switch between them easily. Add in UI scale, add tooltips, differentiate the baked game settings from the host settings in the Essential tab, add a total object counter, and maybe release an offline version of the Krunker editor. That's probably the least important one in my opinion. Now I know that was a lot of suggestions and it will probably put a strain on the developers, so I'm going to reiterate that these are merely suggestions of what I would like to see. Aside from the bug fixes, none of them are absolutely 100% necessary. After all, the new Krunker editor gets the job done the way it is, and it gets it done much better than the old one. However, if the developers were to implement even a few of the bigger changes, it would make the editor even better and more intuitive. In the end, however, it is up to the developers whether or not to take these suggestions to heart and implement them. After all, the developers are not soulless robots. They are real human beings with feelings, talents, and their own limits to how much work they can do. And ultimately, most of us are just a bunch of kids who clearly have no idea about how real game development works. So it's best that whenever we give these kinds of suggestions or report bugs or whatever, we do so with respect to the developers who put their back into it. Having said that, if you have any suggestions you think you'd like for the editor, go ahead and leave a comment. And with that, yeah, those are my suggestions, and to the developers, thank you for everything you've done so far.